All right, beautiful people. Hello, hello, hello. Today is another great day. We're doing Give It to the People live, but we have our She Podcast edition because the She Pod conference is coming up. It is a wonderful thing, a great experience, and this year is actually going to be virtual. So for anybody who said, listen, I can't make it in person, you don't have to worry about it because it's not in person. It's definitely going to be online. Now, Give It to the People is a pretty much an exploration. We talk to different businesses that are in the community, and they can be from anywhere. They can be anywhere in the world, but we specifically focus on BIPOC businesses and women-owned businesses. And when we decided to do this particular series with She Podcast, we wanted to introduce those types of podcasters to you, and then also, of course, let you know about our podcast as well. So we do Give It to the People live every week, typically on Mondays at 12 o'clock, but this series happens on a slightly different day. And so if you're listening, then you don't have to worry about that, because whenever you listen to it, you'll be on. If you're watching live, then thank you and welcome. And so today I have two special guests, and they are in different parts of the country. And so we have Rachel Kim and we have Terrica Carrington. So I'm going to bring them both on right now. And let me switch out because I'd rather put it on you guys instead of on me. All right. So how are you guys doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Happy to be here.
Yay. All right. So I don't know who wants to start, but how did you guys even get into doing copyright? Because that is what you really focus on with Copyright Alliance. And I want people to kind of really know exactly what it does mean to be copywritten, because, you know, I have a trademark, we got some copyrights out there, but sometimes people get confused with what's what and how they need to use it. So can one of you just go ahead, explain that a little bit, and then let us know a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, I can go ahead and get started. So Rachel and I are actually colleagues. We work together at an organization called the Copyright Alliance, and we're both attorneys at the Copyright Alliance. And what the Copyright Alliance does is we are a membership organization that advocates for the rights of creators, specifically dealing with copyright. So we do advocacy before Congress. We do advocacy in the courts with submitting briefs with different federal agencies, just to make sure that there's strong copyright protection throughout the country, and making sure that creators are able to actually enforce their rights, own the works that they create, and potentially be able to earn a living based on those works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything more to add to that. I think Terrica pretty much covered why copyright law is just so important to creators and kind of the mission behind the Copyright Alliance. Again, just making sure that there are strong copyright laws in place so that creators can continue to, earn their living, create their art, create their works, and really contribute to the American culture and economy. Copyright law just makes that happen. And so we're here to make sure that creators know about it and understand it as well, which is sort of the crux of, our presentation and our panel next week at She Podcast Live.
Definitely. And can you tell us what the difference is? So a lot of people, if they don't know what copyright means, that part. So if one of you can explain that, just so people will know exactly what they can get copywritten.
Sure. Yeah. So we do cover this a lot in the presentation next week too. So I won't provide too many spoilers, but just to provide a little bit of a preview, as you point out, there is a difference between the different kinds of what we call intellectual property or soft property. So you have copyright, you have trademarks, you have patents. Trademark patents protect something entirely else, something else. But copyright law really protects the creative expression that artists and creators and just anybody creates. What it really gets to is protecting and making sure that when people create those expressions, they're really protected under copyright law, and that's a little different from trademark, mm-hmm. which kind of protects sort of brand reputation or the goodwill a brand kind of builds up over time, through their businesses and through the services and products that they sell. And then patents, of course, have to do with inventions. So each one of these different types of IP protect different things. And like you point out, some artists actually use all three. Mm-hmm. They might use copyright and trademarks, but it's really important to, as you point out, understand sort of the differences to really truly know how to, enforce and utilize your rights under each of the laws to, mm-hmm. Create and protect your works and, earn your living.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I mean, the one thing that I think is important is because, like, here I'm in North Carolina, and so we work a lot with Elon Law because that's where I went to school at. And so they have a law school. They help you to get these in place, right? And so, people just understanding what they can and can't do and what needs to go underneath what. I think that's an important thing. So for podcasters, when they're talking about actually creating something and you're talking about the creative expression, it would be the words that we're actually saying, right? Like how we say them, any of those kind of things. So what is important if you had like one major thing for podcasters to consider when they're talking about copyright?
So that's a great question. And just to kind of piggyback on the point that you were making about what's protectable within podcasts, you're absolutely right. The words, the scripts that are being written out are protected, but also just the actual recording of the podcast itself. So there are different categories of types of works that are protected by copyright, and sound recordings are one of those types of works. A lot of times when people think of sound recordings, they automatically think about music. They think about what you hear, when you're streaming or what you hear on the radio. But podcasts, audiobooks, those are also protected as sound recordings as well. But to your other question about, what's something important for podcasters to kind of keep in mind when they're thinking about copyright. And this is something that Rachel and I will go in more depth when we do our presentation next week. But there are lots of myths out there about what it means for something to be fair use. And this is actually something that's important for not just podcasters, but creators across the board. There are lots of myths about, how much content you can use from someone else without getting permission and what's considered fair use. Like sometimes I've heard things like, oh, if it's, a snippet of 30 seconds or less, it's fine. Or if you copy, part of a book and it's less than 5 lines, it's fine. And all of these kind of like shorthand rules that get passed around and that people, start to believe, especially if they don't have any kind of foundation in copyright law, believe, and sometimes they can get themselves in trouble. So I think it's really important that creators, podcasters, especially in this context, have that kind of foundation. You don't necessarily have to be a copyright law expert, but it is really important to kind of know the basics so that you can identify where something might be an issue, something you might want to look more into. Just kind of understanding what your rights are, understanding what the rights of other creators are, because just the same way that you want your work to be respected, you want to make sure that if you're, for instance, incorporating music into your podcast or, clips from a TV show or whatever you might be incorporating, that at the same time, you're respecting the rights of other creators as well.
No, and that's super important because I have some clients and I was listening to I was like, oh my God, please. They were doing stuff online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so by them doing stuff online, they were live streaming and they were thinking, I can just use this music. And I was like, oh my God. I said, please go back in and take this down because, if somebody were to hear you using this music in there and we know that it's copywritten because they were using some popular things, wow, it's going to be a problem. And so, just those kind of things that people need to know. I think a lot of times we get so used to just trying to be visual now that people are podcasting visually like we're doing. And then also audibly, it sometimes makes you feel like you want to engage an audience. And, that's not necessarily the thing to do when you're talking about what it's going to be when people are listening to that audio and you infringing on somebody else's rights. So when you're talking about this and you're looking, one of the things that we talk about, of course, is diversity, inclusion, making sure that this can be an inclusive space. And so with podcasting, how does your organization help to really try to foster that for other people?
So I'll let Terrica kind of talk about another program that we have that she spearheaded for the BIPOC community. But, as the Copyright Alliance, since we represent creators across the spectrum of creator disciplines, I mean, we have, everyone from like authors to book publishers to video game developers, podcasters, writers, filmmakers, just everyone across the board. We want to make sure that we're also, encouraging diverse representation, sort of, from the DEI perspective as well. So we do a lot of, work with our community partners like She Podcast, the BIPOC podcast, greater communities to really work together and partner in our programs and resources, and really sharing these educational, resources to make sure that there's a diverse representation and participation in the copyright law system, just making sure everybody understands their rights, how to best protect them, enforce them, exercise them so that they can, create works and provide diverse voices within the American culture. So, we partner up with different organizations to provide those resources, but we also do a lot of communications outreach by highlighting diverse creators. We have creator spotlights in our blogs every month where we feature different creators, the type of work they do, why copyright law is important to them, and so we do a lot of these initiatives to make sure that diverse creators are being highlighted and their voices are being sort of lifted up. But I'll throw it over to Terrica to kind of talk about a specific program that she's spearheaded, which is awesome. So I'll let her talk more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So the program Rachel is talking about is called the Copyright Alliance Initiative to Promote Diversity in Copyright. This is a program that we launched in the fall. And the goal of the program is it's twofold, actually. So one of the goals is to enable BIPOC creators to register their works with the Copyright Office completely for free. So there's an application process, which you can find on our website, which is copyrightalliance.org. People can apply to the program. There are different questions that are in the application, but if a person is eligible for the program, we actually match them with some of our volunteers who work to work with them to register their works with the Copyright Office, in hopes that not only will they be able to, of course, have some works registered for free, but also the goal is for it to be educational as well, so that going forward, these creators will be able to navigate the registration process on their own and register their works on their own going forward. So I know we talked about, the difference between copyright and trademark and patent kind of at the top of the podcast. And one of the things that I think is also important to highlight is if you're getting something registered with the Patent and Trademark Office, whether it's a patent or a trademark, in general, people are going to want and need to use an attorney to do that, just because the process is very complicated. There's much more layers to the process of registering a trademark or a patent. But with the Copyright Office, the copyright registration process is actually much more simplified. It's intended to be able to be done by the creator themselves. But I think there's somewhat of a gap when it comes to just understanding that you can do it yourself, that you don't need to hire and pay for an attorney, but also just needing some, guidance on how to actually approach that. So I think just being able to be paired with someone who can just walk you through the application, show you, okay, this is how you fill out this part. These are the materials that you need to submit. Doing that a few times, I think, can really enable creators going forward to be able to register their works. And so that's what the program does. We launched, I believe it was back in September. The program is set to run tentatively through March of next year. And so we're really excited about that. We're hopeful that this will be a program that will help BIPOC creators to be able to register some of their works and become more introduced to copyright as well as the registration process. And we're going to touch more on this next week during our presentation. But another difference between copyright and patent specifically is that copyright is actually, the protection that you get from copyright is automatic. So as soon as you create your podcast, as soon as you create your photograph, as soon as you create your drawing, whatever your work might be, as soon as it's created, it's protected by copyright, even before you go through the registration process. But there are benefits to registration that are important, and we're going to kind of go more in depth there as well. But I think it's important for podcasters to understand first of all, that they do have rights even before they register their works. They do have rights, because I think a lot of creators don't realize that, and they think, oh, someone copied my work or someone stole my work and I don't have a registration, so there's nothing that I can do. That's not actually true. So there are rights that you have automatically, but registration is still really important. And there are different options for ways that people can register a bunch of works together for like a discounted fee, rather than having to pay, a fee for each work. And so our hope is that by going through this program, the participants will be educated and empowered to be able to navigate and use the registration process to their benefit to help, launch their careers and be successful throughout their careers.
Okay, first of all, amazing. Okay, I just have to say that. Can't wait, because I'm definitely going to check into that, because I think that a lot of times we just start creating And so it's like, okay, it's out there, and you don't think about how successful it could be until then something happens and then somebody steals your work. And then it's like, oh my God, I should have done XYZ. So with this program, you said that it's going to run until March next year. When a person is a part of this, if they said, okay, I do want to do, like you mentioned, the audiobook, or if they said, I'm interested in, just registering my podcast, or maybe they have multiple podcasts, they would then be able to know what they need to do for each one of those things. And that would be able to help them in order to kind of navigate from what we have now to anything else that I want to create going into the future, right?
Yeah, so the registration process is pretty much going to be the same across the board. There are different applications that you might use depending on the type of work, but the overall guidance that you're going to get about how to navigate the registration process and, understanding the materials that you need and how to fill out the application is going to be pretty transferable across different types of works that you might be interested in registering.
Okay. All right. And I really like that. Now, and let me just throw this in there, because even though it's an audio kind of thing, this would also cover possibly courses. Like if a person was doing courses and then maybe they had some audio in that or some video, that was in a course. Because I've seen a lot of people stealing. Like that's just really the biggest thing that I think that people fear. And so whenever people are like, well, I'm just scared somebody's going to steal my work, I always say to them, then don't put it out. Like that's that's kind of the risk that you run whenever you put your work out into the world. And we don't want people to steal things, but at the same time, we do understand, there's that line between inspiration and borrowing. And I took a whole bunch. And so, those things I think are really important when we talk about copyright and just being able to protect ourselves. So what are you most excited about, like as far as with your presentation? Because I know that we've had this shift, but now it enables you to, be anywhere in the world and be able to still present. What are you most excited about for your presentation?
I can start. I think whenever we do presentations for creators on copyright law, I think what's most exciting is to kind of talk about these baseline concepts and how that really transforms these creators' understanding of copyright law. Because sort of like what you pointed out just a couple of minutes ago of, if I'm borrowing this, like, is this protected under copyright law? If I'm borrowing this, is this protected under copyright law? And there's like different things, different kind of steps you go through to determine, like, do I need permission for this? Do I need authorization for this? So it's really, I think, like a pleasure for us to kind of help creators understand that better, because copyright law, it's a constitutional right, believe it or not. And, the purpose of it is to promote the progress of science, or to promote the progress of, culture and arts and everything. And so it understands that balance of there are creators who create and creators who have to use. And, copyright law is meant to help, promote that creation process. And so just unlocking these nuggets of knowledge of how copyright law works and how creators can apply that to their craft, I think is one of the highlights of the presentation. And kind of like, as Terrica mentioned earlier, sort of breaking apart the myths or the common misconceptions about copyright law that are out there. Like Terrica said, there's stuff out there that's like, well, if I only use 10 seconds of this or a little bit of this, like, that's totally okay. So just being able to enable creators to understand the nuances better, I think is one of the best things about this presentation.
Yeah, and I'll honestly second what Rachel said. So, I mentioned how we do advocacy work at the Copyright Alliance on behalf of creators, just trying to protect creators' rights and make sure that there's strong copyright protection. But another big part of what we do at the Copyright Alliance is the educational component. And so, we do presentations like this for different types of creators where we, kind of tailor our presentation to whatever information might be particularly important for that particular sector. And I just think it's really important to be able to actually speak to creators face to face, give them that information, kind of hear from them, what are some of the things that have been confusing for you? What are some of the challenges that you faced throughout your career? And, I think you mentioned a point earlier that when creators, podcasters go to make their work, they're focused on the creative side of it. They want to get their work out there. They want to do the art. They want to have the fun. Like this is what they're passionate about. And that's important. That's really important. And I think a lot of times creators kind of get involved in their career, get involved in their field, and they're focused on the art side and not so much on the business side of things or the legal side. And that's understandable because that's what they're passionate about. But I think it's great for us to be able to kind of meet them where they are and give them that information so that they can, use that to help empower them, and then also become aware of things that they may not have even thought of, things that might not have even crossed their minds. Because some of the misconceptions that we were talking about, I think a lot of times people have totally good intentions. They want to do the right thing. They want to make sure that they're, following the law and respecting people's rights. But if the information that's out there that they're hearing, that they're being given is not the right information, that still leaves them in a very vulnerable place where they might be, breaking the law or might be, not respecting another creator's rights. And so I'm just really excited. We always love the opportunity to be able to talk to creators and work with creators and just help educate them about copyright. So I'm really looking forward to that.
No, and I think that's great because I'm just like remembering, and I think this kind of puts me into the mindset when COVID was happening and people were wanting to take someone's book and read the book online for the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw where they were like, we can't do this today because this is somebody else's work. And even though I'm reading the work, that is a part of their copyright, right? Like we couldn't just go out there. And so I think about like when we were kids and you had Reading Rainbow and you didn't think about that, right? Like you were just there like, LeVar Burton, read me a story. And LeVar Burton seems to be one of these themes as we do this podcast thing. So I'm gonna shout out to Crackers because she definitely loves LeVar Burton too. But I think that the thing is sometimes we're so used to seeing things in a certain format that we don't realize we're violating. Mm-hmm. That's really, where I think the magic of your presentation is coming in, because it's like, oh, shoot, was I doing that? Like, mm-hmm. I was really violating. Like, I need to stop doing this. And then, it gives you that. And so if a person is saying, look, I want to do this as a business, because that's where really my focus is, this presentation will help them to know how to set things up so that this way from the beginning, they can be successful, and then they can kind of know if a person is violating their rights. And I think a lot of times we want to put stuff on Amazon and Audible, and now that we have all of these platforms, it's very easy for people to get the information. It's very easy for us to create it, but we also have to protect that for ourselves. And so I'm excited for your presentation, and that's one of the things where I was like, oh yes, I definitely want to go to that, because just knowing what's right and what's wrong is the thing that's going to save you a whole lot down the line. Now, if you were talking to a person who maybe wanted to even license some of their things, because I have some clients where they're like, well, we have a curriculum, we want to license some things, or, we know that we want to be able to use this later on. This would also be something great for them to be able to come to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when copyright law is what enables the licensing. So just to understand sort of what your exclusive rights are under copyright law, like what copyright law actually allows, you to do with your work is an important thing to understand. There's 6 different kinds of rights under copyright law, and we go over that in our presentation as well. So just understanding the different ways, like you said, works are being used, albeit in different formats, I think is really important to understand sort of those baseline concepts to help you understand how to license your work, what you're licensing to the other person, the scope of that license. Just understanding, again, these concepts will help, I think, podcasters and creators kind of understand how to effectively license their rights and what they're licensing at the end of the day, so that there's no confusion later down the road.
Okay, and I think that that's wonderful. So I definitely want to touch on that. Now I need to ask this question because I would just be like totally bonkers if I didn't ask this. How do you feel like the effect of artificial intelligence is just coming through and just causing all kinds of calamity right now? Because this morning I go on YouTube, I click on the thing, and it was a Michael Jackson drill album. And I'm just like, wow. What? And so I had to click on it, and I was like, I love Michael Jackson, but I was like, how do I feel about this? So I sent the link to my friends immediately. And I'm like, they have taken Michael and he is in the AI and now he's doing drill music. And it really bothered me a little bit. But what do you think about that as far as some of those effects of AI with copyright right now?
So we both laughed as soon as you asked that because it feels like we talk about AI all day, every day.
All the time.
But to answer your question, I think AI is touching so many different areas of our lives, of the law, and copyright is no exception to that. To your example of, a work of Michael Jackson being used and his voice and his likeness being used and a new drill album of Michael Jackson being created is honestly, that touches on a lot of different areas of the law. So it touches on rights of publicity issues that might, deal with the sound of his voice, maybe his likeness, his face, if they're, using any kind of imagery associated with it. But to the copyright part, and something that, we talk about a lot at the Copyright Alliance and that we've been, very vocal publicly about, is the fact that in order to create those works, they have to train on and they have to ingest works created by Michael Jackson. And traditionally, those works would be licensed for various different uses. And a lot of times these AI companies that are, coming out and making these, transformations of, taking someone's original work and creating some sort of AI version of it, they're not licensing that underlying work. And so that means that now people are able to potentially monetize on Michael Jackson without actually paying for the use of that underlying work. And so that's a big, important issue. And we're using Michael Jackson as an example, but there are lots of creators out there that do not have anywhere near the notoriety or, financial success that Michael Jackson achieved, whose works are likewise being, scraped off the internet, being used, being ingested into these AI systems, whether it's to create music, it can be used to create, visual work outputs, and they're not being paid those licensing fees. And that's how they make a living. That's how they feed their families. That's how they, pay their bills. And so it's really important. Of course, we're all very excited about AI. I think also a little bit concerned too, as we should be. But I think it's important to also think about, who's being impacted and how can we make sure that the equity that they deserve, based on the fact that it's their works being used to empower these systems and to create these works, to make sure that they're actually being compensated appropriately.
Yeah, just to add one or two things to Terrica's wonderful explanation of why we're so engrossed with the, AI stuff these days. It really is about that responsible development of AI. And are we responsibly using these tools? Like she said, I think a lot of artists are really excited about these tools and are using these tools. It's just, asking the question of, wait a second, how was this created? Is this, again, going back to, I think, the crux of this interview of like, what are other people's rights being implicated here? How would I feel if that was me, right? Like, we're all in this creative ecosystem. And so just really understanding, how these tools work, how these tools were made, what this means for creators overall, is a lot of, the big tough questions we're facing today.
No, we definitely are. And when I think about that, Terrica brought up a point, when you talk about money. So even though it's free, even though the person is using the AI, if they get enough listens on YouTube, they are going to make money off of it, right? And so it's just like this kind of conundrum. It's like we're stuck in this. We got to go back and forth and see, what's going to work. And so I just think it's very interesting. I think you guys have your work cut out for you. With the AI. And I definitely think that that's something that from a lawyer standpoint might be actually really good because it'll be a lot of billable hours right there. Because somebody's going to violate, right? So if we could leave anybody with like a last word, some type of motivation or something, just give me something. What would you guys say?
There's a lot of things I think.
It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be something, just something to motivate the masses out there.
I think it's that keep doing what you're doing, keep creating. We're here to, educate creators again and to really help them understand copyright law so that they can, better protect themselves, that they can, continue creating the works they create. Because like Terrica said earlier, I mean, I think creators don't come to, their job saying, I'm going to make $1 million today. Like, it's really a lot of passion that fuels, the things that they do and behind the works that they create. So just keep the passion alive, keep the creativity alive. Like, America needs it more than ever. And just, encouraging that creative spirit, because it's just so important to hear from different kinds of people, different walks of life. It's just, the more voices we can add to that American experience, I think it just enriches us all to have, people continue creating.
Yes, I agree. Okay, Terrica, what's your
And
final word?
I'll leave you all with, I think as creators, there's lots of important tools to have in your tool belt to help empower your career and help, plan the trajectory of what you want your career to be. And copyright is one of many important tools. So hopefully we'll see many of you next week at our presentation. You can learn some new things that can help you, navigate your career going forward. And as Rachel mentioned, Copyright Alliance is here with a lot of different resources, videos, FAQs, other things on our website, copyrightalliance.org. So check us out and hope to see you soon.
Definitely. Well, I am definitely going to be doing some more checking out. I already looked, but I don't think I saw that program. So I'm very excited about that. And I definitely want to investigate a little bit more. So if you're watching live, thank you guys so much for watching. If you are watching on the replay, then you go right ahead and you can still leave comments. We still love those even afterwards. And for everybody else in the world, make sure you always show up and show out and continue to give it to the people. Thank you guys so much for being on today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yes.